Got it.
Mhm.
How's it
So it's going great. A little nervous, but I'm still glad to like have you here and I'm able to talk.
going?
I'm
Got
pretty
nothing to
shocked
be
that
nervous about.
yeah, I'm still shocked that I even got this far. But
Yeah.
anyways, tell us a little bit about yourself, Mr. Feng.
Hi. Well, Will's good. You don't need to call me Mr. Fang.
All
My
right.
name is Will Fang. I am a animation producer that is currently working in both the American animation industry and the Japanese animation industry.
Mhm.
Yeah.
All right. So like the first question these interviews always start off with is well, like what was your great awakening? What got you into animation? What was like the movie or like the TV show or like the artist that like motivated you saying like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to like really do this.
Yeah, I don't think there was one specific show that got me there. I think what happened was is that I've always felt connected emotionally to animation more so than movies, and I always love TV, animation, movies, live action, whatever it was. And when I first started out, I wanted to go into film, and I studied film. And then when I was in university studying it, I realized people were telling me it's like, oh, you can actually make a living off of animation. And so I was like, oh fuck. Like I can cuss, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Expletives are okay.
Yeah,
But
like, dude, I don't give a shit. Curse as much as
yeah.
you
All
want
right.
to.
So what happened was is that I realized like, oh shit, like I can make a living making cartoons. And so like during my last year of film school, I was like kind of scrambling, looking around for like someone to teach me. And then I ended up getting a mentor who is Juno Lee.
Oh,
He is the partner of one of the partners of the studio and a supervising director on like a good amount of
yeah.
projects. And I studied under him for about 2 years. And then during that time, Juno was on Megas XLR, and Megas wrapped up over at Cartoon Network. And he's like, I'm going over to the studio that the supervising director created, and they're doing small work. And I'm just trying to, like, I'm just doing work there. And so I got invited over to see, like, as a volunteer, or actually as like paid work. It's actually paid work, not volunteer. I want to make that clear.
Okay, okay.
That they needed help inking and painting some drawings. And then when I went in, I was just like using Photoshop and just like transferring the pencil drawings and coloring the characters. And little did I know afterwards it was the opening for Avatar there, The Last Airbender.
Yeah, dang, that's crazy. Because like,
Yeah, so
about,
that's man.
oh, so like about Gino Lee, I find like, I read somewhere that he solo animated like games for Avatar too, which I also find to be like really crazy. Um,
Solo animated, who did?
Gino Lee for Avatar.
Oh, there was other people like
Oh,
Chris Pernowski, David Vandervoort, Juno Lee, Mike
mhm.
Roush. We were all like part of they were all animating, and then like his students that they hired, we came in on our like when we were available, and we would go in and start, like processing the drawings and then painting them in Photoshop and then handing them over to a compositor.
After like Avatar, where like what projects were you involved at Titmouse after that?
After that, I was involved with Metalocalypse. I was involved in a couple short form projects, a lot of pilots. And then after that, like like all these jobs are freelance jobs, right? So it's like once the project's over, they kind of like let you go and you go figure out where your next calling is or where your next project is. And so I ended up from Titmouse over to a couple other studios around the block.
Another question I have is like your
Mhm.
translation work. Like, how did you arrive from like just like doing animation to like suddenly translating materials for like overseas stuff? Because I like saw on your LinkedIn that you did stuff for like Thundercats 2011, and you mentioned that you did translation because like that was animated by like Studio 4C if I recall correctly. So like, how
Yeah.
did that go and how did that come about?
So it's weird because like my Japanese isn't like I didn't properly learn my Japanese, but for some odd reason, like I was able to pick it up because I studied it in college and I studied it in high school. I was about to major in it, but I didn't because I suck at it. At least I feel like I suck at it. And a lot of it was like learning from our line producer because our line producer was Japanese. So
Right.
I would slowly start like using, typing in Japanese, and like knowing the lingo and being able to like send emails in that form, but they were very basic. There was a coordinator on the Studio 4C side that was bilingual, spoke English and Japanese. So she kind of took over majority of the translation. But over the years, it's just like as you pick it up from experience, you start to become more fluent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now my emails are purely in Japanese, or I can take meetings in Japanese. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Still not the
and like
best, but yeah.
I mean, people always say like, oh my, I'm not very good in like this language. Like someone with like English is like their second language. They say like, oh, I'm not very good at English, and like their English is even better than mine, or
Yeah.
like most
Yeah.
other native speakers.
Yeah.
So it's like,
I used to have roommates that were ex Caltech like postdoc, and obviously English isn't their first language, but their vocabulary was way above mine.
like run circles around you and just like,
Yeah,
oh,
exactly.
okay, I feel adequate now. But
Yeah.
yeah, so it's just like, yeah, you like career-wise, you just kind of been around the block. You've done like ink, paint, writing, translation, compositing, management, and now producing. So like, how do you feel like all how like your past experience like built up to like where you are now?
I think that's like the biggest part was all the past experience is an amalgamation of what I do now. Because I've done it all, right? Which is
Yeah,
like kind of a rare thing. So I know exactly from like start to finish, from development all the way up to post and delivery, even like from pitching to, like whatever's like, just everything at the end of production. I think it's like because I've been all that, it makes me more well-rounded in
for
terms
sure.
of like how to produce something, because I think a lot of producers when they go in they only know the production side, because there's kind of like a track, right, where it's like you start off as a storyboard revisionist, then you become a storyboard artist, and then you become a like episodic director, and then you become a supervising director, like there's like a type of track, and you kind of
Yeah,
never branch off to see what happens in the other departments.
yeah,
And like luckily Titmouse, when they were smaller, they were more of a boutique studio. So I was able to get the experience of like doing everything. Right. And so like I'm able to kind of like put my hands on everything, but that allows me to understand how the pipeline and the workflow of a production works.
we're able to talk about this. How would you feel from compared to like your work on Nagios Productions, like anime productions? How do you feel like they differ, and how do you feel like were you like prepared for like the massive amount of differences, or if they even differed that?
Oh, the first one that I ran into, I was not prepared. And even to this day, there's a lot of things to still pick up from like a Japanese production. So this is the part that I can talk about. I can talk about the generalization of the differences of pipeline and workflow. Like, and that's something that I'm currently trying to figure out how to make like the collaboration of the West and the East work together, because their pipelines just are completely different. You
Yeah,
know, like if are you aware of like how Western pipeline works, like American pipeline works?
yeah, I know that most of Western stuff, most of it's like done pre-prod and the animation's like outsourced. But even for like
Yeah,
the problem is not necessarily a problem, like the way things are, just like different shows have like drastically different pipelines. Because for
yeah,
example, some work can be done like for like, traditional work can still be like that can be outsourced, but sometimes like other shows can have their animations generally done in-house as well.
yeah,
Yeah, and like different quirks, completely different styles, style guides and stuff. Like for example,
yeah,
oh, this one thing that's fine for this one show isn't fine for the other show.
yes.
Japanese productions, there's still of course a difference, but it's like a proper baseline at least.
I think overall it's pretty much like both productions have the same baseline, which is like, there's three phases, right? There's a pre-production, there's a production, and there's a post-production, right? It just depends on like at what point do you focus your creativity and your energy on. For example, in the West, we focus a lot on pre-production, right?
Yeah.
Like we focus a lot on the animatic because we ship things overseas, right?
Mhm.
Like we ship it to Korea, India, Malaysia, like Ireland or wherever that might be.
Yeah.
Um, and so the animatic ends up becoming like this like everything condenses at the animatic phase, because that's where we are able to get things approved. It's also like a form of like a blueprint. It's also like a form of liability when we ship it overseas, because it's like, well, if it wasn't in the animatic, then someone has to pay for it,
Mm.
right? Like it holds people responsible for that. In Japan, because everything's done more in-house, the animatic isn't that much of a focus.
Yeah.
right? So for example, like when I have to do productions and I'm like, hey, can we get an animatic for the client to see? Sometimes like you'll get it from Japanese studios, like we don't do those, and if anything, you see it on the layout phase. Like when you get all the layouts in on the Japanese side, and then all of a sudden you cut it together because you can mess with the timing or you can adjust things at that point before you send it off to Genga, which is the keyframing, like at that point, that's when it all comes together, right? And then also the approval process is vastly different, and that's how it governs how the productions are made, right? So for
Mm-hmm.
example, in a Western production, a lot of it is making sure that a big streamer or a production studio, I want to say production studio, like a big, like, network or streamer, they need to get their eyes on it and they need to put their notes on it, right, so that it fits their mandates.
So like,
um
I'm sorry, I was like, so like S&P or like something a little different from
Yeah,
that?
maybe SMP, or
Okay.
maybe like your executive, like your executive overseeing the show, which is like called a current executive, right? Like there's usually somebody that kind of like is the voice of the buyer or the streamer, like Netflix, for example, or Disney Plus, or Amazon, right? Like they always have notes, right? In terms of like, does this work for their company? And because they're paying for it essentially, right? And so that's where it's like it gets a little bit hard because all that kind of comes at the end, at a certain stage. So at the animatic stage, they want to put some notes on it. At the animation stage, they usually want to see it as what we call like priority footage or first takes, which is like completed animation,
Yeah.
right? And so like the schedule and the pipeline in the West is built specifically for this executive approval,
Yeah.
like situation or
Mhm.
scenario. Whereas in Japan, there isn't that, right? Where it's like it's not like Fuji Television or TV Tokyo gets a say in like the giving notes in every single content, right? It's because it's formed by the committee, and then like you kind of just like let the studio do its own thing, right? And that's because of the budget and the time that's allotted to make it. So therefore they spend less time on pre-pro, but they spend a lot more time on animation, and then less and then like more probably like around the same time for post-production composite. If you look at it kind of like in terms of like a bar graph of like kind of like what's important,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Like pre-production is big in the West, and then all of a sudden it's like animation, because it's shipped out, it's kind of like throw it over a wall, and then hopefully the basketball you threw over the wall as a basketball, and
Yeah.
then and then you have like post-production, which is, depending on what it is, it might just be sound and mix, because most of the time compositing is done overseas too, right? Whereas in Japan, it's like pre-pro is like kind of like this much,
Yeah.
animation is this much, and post is actually that much too. So if you see the extremities, too bad I can't like draw a bar right now, but you'll see like, okay, this is what they focus on more than say like east versus west. And so then at that point it's like those are the differences, and how do you get two completely different like pipelines to kind of like converge together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing about pre-prod, especially like for anime, because like there's so much anime coming out now. It's like they
Yeah.
keep pumping it out more and more with
Yeah.
every year. And like I figured that like yeah, of course the pre-prod side is gonna have to suffer a lot if you're going to like crank out like what 80 shows a season. Like something's got to give, and like the
but
part
that's
almost.
but
Mhm.
that there's 500 to 700 studios out in Japan, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah,
I think, and also majority of the time, I think what people are starting to catch on this, but like when it comes to Japanese animation, a lot of it is adaptation.
yeah,
So it's a lot different, because like yes, you still need to do pre-pro and you still
mhm,
need to do like designs and the whole process of still making animation, but at least you have a base,
yeah.
right? And you
The
can't
manga,
like
like
digress.
yeah.
Yeah, you can't digress too far from it. So for example, like I was watching Jujutsu Kaisen this morning. And like I've read the comic. I'm up to date on the comic, right? On the manga. And so it's like when I watch the anime, it's like there's not that much like difference. You know, there may be shot differences, additional like shots, or like, you know, maybe an angle is different, but relatively it's the same when it comes to like, you know, taking the manga panels and then placing them, you know, like adapting them into anime. Whereas like in the US, a lot of it is original,
Yeah.
right? Like even though there's a lot of IP stuff right now that like Castlevania, Devil May Cry, or like all that stuff that's coming out, like there's no manga to base it from, you know. So they would have to kind of create those designs and those shots from scratch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a complex situation all around, but
Yeah,
yeah.
all around.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
never one is not easier than the other.
Yeah, different advantages, disadvantages, but
Yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
guess okay, well, moving on to a lighter question, since you briefly
Okay.
mentioned Jujutsu Kaisen, is there any, like, just not even anime, but just, like, anything that caught your eye recently? Anything animated that you really enjoyed that you wanna, let's, like, talk about for a little bit?
I mean, like I'm really like I just finished Primal. So the thing, as much as like I'm like, you know, a lot of people are like, oh, Will works in Japanese animation. I love like animation all around the world.
Yep.
I like short form a lot. I like experimental films a lot. But going back to your question, I just wrapped up on Primal. Like I just finished like 2 seasons. I'm watching Jujutsu Kaisen, which is probably like the only one I'm watching right now this season, the only anime I'm watching this season.
Yeah, like,
Um,
summer season's been real dry. Like, anime
yeah,
seasons
yeah. Summer
usually
seasons are usually, it's usually the fall and the spring are the big
yeah,
seasons.
those are always the big hitters in my book, but just, like,
Yeah.
summer is just, like I know because it's hot, that means it has to be dry, but, like, you don't have to take it too seriously, but,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't have to take it literal, right?
mm-mm,
Yeah.
but, yeah,
Um, I watch a lot of live action. So like I just like storytelling a lot. So I just finished The Bear. I've been watching just move I watched that Sisu movie that was pretty awesome. It's like a Finnish John Wick. Like it's pretty cool. It's SISU. It's about like a World War II like vet or something, or it's like a World War One vet and it's the end of World War II, and then he like finds like gold, and then he has to like he kills a bunch of Nazis, like a Nazi company. It's pretty awesome.
but anyways, like, Primal, like, that's a show I've been meaning to watch for, like, ages now, ever since it, like, first announced, it's like, "Yeah, I wanna see more of that." Like, the issue is, like, I love Gen Z stuff, but the problem is I've never fully moved on from the cancellation of Symbiotic Titans, like, whenever I watch
Oh
that
yeah, yeah,
no, I'm gonna be
yeah.
salty about that for the rest of my life. Because like, when I heard the cancellation for that for the first time, I was, like, what, 10 or 11? I was, like I was, like, depressed for that entire weekend, and, like, I still had to go to school on Monday. I was like, "I can't go to school, mom. My favorite show got canceled. How do you expect me to move on?" Like, get, like, a little, like, just, like, get a little sad about that sometimes. But like I know I need to watch Primal. I especially need to watch it because he said he's still planning on making more. I've watched a couple episodes of, like Unicorn Warriors Eternal.
Yeah,
And still
same.
has
Yeah,
and like it has that sort of dynamic I like from like Symbiotic Titan.
yeah,
It's a
yeah,
very like interesting show, like all around, because like the influences are like so obvious. Because like everyone can like talk about, oh, it's like very like like Fletcher inspired, like Tezuka inspired. It's just like
yeah.
kind of interesting to me. Like people like can just genuinely point that out. Like a lot of people saying the same thing too, because like the inspirations are just so obvious. I've watched a couple episodes of that, and I want to watch more. On the anime side, like, yeah, I haven't watched much either because, like, again, summer season's real dry.
Yeah.
Fall's about to start soon. I'm really, really looking forward to I don't know how to pronounce it properly, but it's like Farron or whatever. It's about like this elf who's immortal and like her party passes away and like they're like she's just trying to like
Oh,
pretend yeah.
yeah, yeah. I've heard of this one. Yeah, yeah. I think it's a comic, right?
Yeah, it started out as a manga. And like the
Yeah.
adaptation just like aired its first episode today. I need to watch that. So look,
Oh,
well, not first episode because they do like this thing where it's just like, oh, we're doing a 2 hour premiere when it's really just like 4 episodes stitched
oh, you
together.
mean like
Don't
they're
get it.
pulling a Oshinoko?
God, that show and its consequences on society. Anyways,
Yeah.
but like, yeah, 4 episodes. 4 episodes came out. I need to watch that soon, ASAP. But yeah, yeah. And there's like another show coming out later this season called like Undead Unluck. I don't know much about the manga, but like I love the director. His name was like Yuki Yase. He used to do like a lot of work at Shaft, and he also directed Fire Force a couple of years ago. And I really love
Oh,
that show
yeah.
too. very interesting atmosphere because you're like, you got like the high octane action shit. Like five
Yeah.
seconds later, it's like bounced off by some really interesting off kilter direction. It's like moments of like pauses and like introspection, and then you just throw into another fight.
Yeah.
That contrast to me, or like contrast in general, is always like very very interesting to me. But
Yeah.
anyways, let's get back on track with the questions. I guess another thing I want to ask social media, because like
Yeah.
trying to get back to anime a little bit, it's just like a lot of people are recruiting animators online now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess outside of that though, like how do you feel like social media impacted like the general animation sphere for both like like both US and Japan, or just
I think it's
in
great.
general?
Yeah, I think in great, like in general, like I'll talk about it in both like, American and Japanese. I think social media is the greatest thing that right now in terms of animation and finding artists, because there's so many artists out there.
Yeah.
And like I'm mostly on Instagram. So like I'm on Instagram. I always click on that discover, like that's discover icon, and I'm just like always like just searching for more artists and more artists, and then like I bookmark them. And I always tell like art students to just like make an Instagram account, like or a Behance or whatever you want to do, but just get your work out there, and like don't hold it back. Put it out there, and then people will start seeing it. I think it's depending on the country is how they really use social media. So for example, Japan's really big on Twitter, or X, for parentheses formerly Twitter. And so Japan's really big on Twitter. So that's an easy way to like kind of like if you start posting your Genga work, or say you're an aspiring animator, then like you post your work there, they'll probably end up finding you some way somehow. And then like I mean, I usually use Instagram to find indie artists and Western artists and Latin artists, and like it's been great because that's how I was able to use like social media to staff up on my productions when I was like producing. Where I was like, oh, I never heard of this person before, but this person looks like he can do the work. We can try him out for one short form job, right? Doesn't have to be long term commitment. And then we hire them, and they're great, and we keep working with them. And that's how you kind of build a rapport and a stable of artists to kind of like when you have a project to do, you can reach out to your friends now, because productions always feel like camaraderie, like you're in the trenches with them. And then you can like hit them up and say like, hey, like I got a commercial gig, are you interested? It's like, yeah, let's jump on it and let's do it.
Yeah, that thing about like you said, but like short form stuff and like using it as a way to like train people. Cause like I was listening to like a podcast with Pernosky. He mentioned something like that, saying that like, oh yeah, commercials will be like a good way to like, you have like a lot of money. So like there's room to make mistakes, especially if you like green. So like, yeah, usually short form stuff would be like the best way to like generally train people. Like you said, like form like a
Yeah.
connection, a relationship, so you can reach out to
Yeah.
them in the future. And like I feel like maybe I'm not having been like paying attention, but I feel like he mentioned in the podcast that we're kind of losing stuff like that as we go along.
Yeah.
So
Well, the
yeah.
politics of it all is kind of complicated,
Oh
like
yeah.
to begin with, right? Like, so for example, if you have somebody that is good, somebody that's good and then wants to possibly jump over to a director position, that might be kind of difficult, like to have them become a director for a show, right? Because
Oh
there's a lot of decisions that are involved in that. Whereas like if you have short term, it's kind of like short form projects have what's the word, like it's a less of a gamble, and like there's less to lose from it. And once you do it, you get in and you get out. And if it didn't work out with that director, then you go, all right, well, maybe they're not ready for it just yet. But then sometimes you find a star director, right, that comes out of the blue, and then you go, wow, we gotta keep working with this person.
and like going back to like changing trends and stuff. We're currently in an era of just like remakes, reboots, revivals, and just like
Yeah.
other IP based projects. Like, how do you feel about that right now?
Well, I mean, I've done this for a while. I mean, I've been in animation for about 18 years already. And
Hmm.
like all I see it right now is it's just a trend. You're
Oh,
right. Like it's a mandate, it's a trend or a mandate from all the streamers and the buyers of dictating like, this is, if we make this, therefore, we'll be successful and we make money. right? So, but eventually like trends change, and
Yeah.
eventually like say if there's like a breakout hit that's original, like hopefully I'm thinking like Scavenger's Reign, which is I'm excited to see because it's original. And then if it does really well on the metrics on the algo, then maybe there might start to be a shift of like, okay, maybe we'll start dipping into original content now. Like during the pandemic, it was all original, right?
Yeah.
And then now it's all IP because you can like it's just essentially just a trend. And eventually, who knows, you might say like 3 years, 4 years from now, the streamers are all doing like girl with a puppy dog or something like that, or like unicorns that turn into jet planes or whatnot, whatever that might be. Like you never know where the future will go.
Yeah.
uh, but as of right now, if you want to play that game of getting a show made, then you probably have to focus on IPs. That is something that is kind of not new to me because of Japanese animation. All Japanese animations are IP, right? They're all that's where the word gensaku comes from, right? Like when you label like animation, you go, oh, is that gensaku? And then it's like, oh yeah, it's essentially like there was an original property that they're adapting.
Also, what does Gensaku translate into? It's
I
just
don't
literally
know.
like
Gensaku is like
original. Because
original work.
like okay,
Yeah.
I figured
Yeah.
you said
Gen is like original, and then saku is work.
yeah, because I know
Gensaku.
like Genga it's like original picture, and like Saku's will probably go short for like Sakuga. So like, oh okay,
Yeah, or like
yeah.
Seisaku production.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess the next question would be like, well, like I know you probably just answered most of it because I want to ask like, okay, then where do you see like the future of like the industry right now? But you mentioned
Yeah,
like, okay, we're just chasing trends, but it just depends like what's the next big breakout hit. I
yeah.
really do hope it's something like Scavenger's Reign because like the trailer for that just came out like a couple of days ago, and like I know it's based off a short. I need to watch that, but like and
That short's amazing.
it's coming out so soon too. I can't
Yeah,
believe
October
that.
19th.
Yeah, dang. I'm for sure gonna watch it because like all my family, we have like all the streaming services, and even I get a little lost sometimes. But like, yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I was talking to a friend yesterday about Thundercats because I worked on the 2011 version of Thundercats, and which was Studio 4C. And that's actually what kickstarted me to actively go into Japanese animation. Because I was like, oh, I got a taste of it. It's like I want more, you know. But it was funny relating to what you just said. Like I was like, this was done at Warner Brothers Animation, so it's probably on Max. I just like blindly said that, and my friend looked it up and he's like, it's not on HBO Max or Max at all. I'm like, where is it? And they're like, oh, it's on Hulu.
I thought like
Yeah,
that show
and
wasn't
so
streaming.
so
I thought that show wasn't streaming at all. Because
yeah, the
like,
same here. I was like, maybe you have to buy it off of like Voodoo or something, but he was like, oh, it's actually on Hulu, which is weird.
yeah, because like it's just one of those shows that I figured that like, oh, they don't care about it at all. So like you probably have to like, pirate it to find it or something.
Oh, for me, it was more like, well, it's Warner Brothers, right? But Hulu's owned by Disney. So it's like, how is a Warner Brothers show on a Disney platform?
It's also weird too. Well, not necessarily full time, but you said Thundercats was like the big catalyst for you to work on more Japanese stuff.
Yeah.
So just tell us more about working on Thundercats then.
Yeah, like it was great. It was really interesting show where we work with Studio 4C. And so it was a very small production group at over at Warner Brothers. I think we were only like 10 people. And then so what we would do is we would send the conceptualized work, like concept artwork, the script, and I think like just kind of like a color script. Early on, we were doing color scripts, like all the way back in 2011 for shows. And that would kind of inform Studio 4C. And then Studio 4C would actually do the pre-pro work. The pre-pro work, the storyboards, kind of like all around. Like we were almost like the Warner Brother unit was kind of like a concept design, right? And then like to execute the actual materials or the designs, like Studio 4C would do that. So then like they would do the work and then it would come back and then we would like do our revisions. We would note them, give them feedback. And then afterwards, afterwards we would send the revised stuff over back to Japan, and Japan would be like, is this okay to animate? And we're like, it's okay to animate. And then they would go into animation. And so that at that point, that's where like usually we didn't really get any kind of like, we didn't give any kind of notes because the animation was just like good, you know what I mean? And so we would be able to do some revisions, but they would always be more technical. Like say if we caught like the coloring looks weird, or like, you know, the hair strand is a different color, it's not supposed to be that way. But we wouldn't really like go back and like reanimate things, because Japanese animators tend to have pride in their work. So like usually it comes out pretty good.
Oh, so that's interesting. Going for like a show like that, we felt mostly hands off, if that's okay to say. But like, okay, so like your next anime production, I imagine that would probably be like a massive contrast, right? Or is it more of the same?
Well, are you talking about Thundercats?
No, like, oh, yeah, I was talking about. I was gonna say, like, would you say like Thundercats felt hands off for you, or no?
But it's pretty hands-on, because
Yeah.
like we were still doing like, you know, we would still have to like be in the story room, and then we would still have to like, you know, pump out based on the script. So we have to pump out the concept designs, right? Like of all the characters, props, vehicles. We had an art director that did most of that work. And then we would send that over to Japan, and Japan would kind of like take their pass on it to make sure that, you know, it works, it's animatable for the animators. And then we do the back and forth, and then once that's all done, we would go into animation. It's still a lot of coordinating, because there's a lot of like, you got the American side going, you know, and then you have going out, and then you have the Japanese stuff coming in. So there was always kind of like a back and forth of things coming in and out. It was almost like a peer, like an import export, like like getting stuff, cargo coming in and cargo getting sent out.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So after Thundercats, what was like the next anime production you worked on after that?
Jesus, I think like
That
I don't
reaction.
remember. I think like no, what was that? Oh, you know what it was? So after Thundercats, I decided to go independent, and I kind of went around the block, and I think like I eventually started doing a video game opening, which was for Indivisible, which was with Lab Zero Games.
Yeah.
So I was able to get Trigger to do the opening for Indivisible, and that was the next ones. And that one was more of like taking my experience from Thundercats, and like
Mhm.
actually a lot of the things that I work on is the experience of Thundercats, of a successful kind of like hybrid show,
Mhm.
and like implementing them for my other projects. Um so yeah, the one after that was Indivisible, the opening.
Oh dang, that's a gap. Because like I
Yeah.
remember when it got like I remember when that first got announced, everyone made such like a huge like big deal about. It. I was like, "Whoa, Indivisible opening by Trigger!" Because like
Yeah.
that was the year where it got announced. That was like this. I think it was like the same time they also announced it. Like they were doing like Takafumi Hori did like this all that animation for like Steven Universe.
Oh
So
yeah, I
like
also was
yeah.
a part of that. I don't know. I've done too many stuff. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I guess sort of backing things up a bit, how did you come in contact with Trigger? Were they
Uh,
just looking for people?
Comic Con.
Huh?
Comic Con.
Oh,
Yeah. So I had a friend who works at Pixar. His name is Grant Alexander, and,
yeah,
and they were working on the, what was it called, like the toys that time forgot or something. It was a kind of like a Thundercat slash like dinosaur thing.
yeah.
Uh, and they made a faux opening, and they were premiering it at Comic Con one year. And my buddy was like, "Do you want to meet Trigger?" And I'm all, "What?" And then he's like, "Do you want to meet Trigger?" And I was like, "Sure." And so that was the year when Imaishi Yoshinari, Sushio, Koyama, Wakabayashi, and Tatsuru Tatemoto, like that's when they were all like, what is it, six? Yeah, all six of them went to Comic Con. And so I met them in line getting into the Pixar panel for that for that show. And then after that, we kind of just became friends. I kept in contact with them. And then one year one year I decided to like take a like an internship, like say like, oh, I want to intern at a studio, and somehow I was able to finagle my way in to a studio, and it was with the parent company Ultra Super Pictures, which is the parent company or holding company for four animation studios. And it happens to be that Triggers underneath one of like it's part of that parent company. So then I started like kind of like always going down to the third floor and like hanging out with them and talking with them. And eventually, when I became business development for Ultra Super Pictures, every studio I went to would always be like, it's like I represent four studios, Light and Film, Sanjigen, Trigger, Ordet at the time, and Ors at the time, and then like all the clients, potential clients would always go, so what's Trigger up to, you know, and,
I
and then
would,
so so
yeah.
so then it just became like more and more that I worked with Trigger, because they like all the clients wanted to know what Trigger was up to, and so with all the FaceTime and the work that came in, eventually that's how I like joined the studio.
Oh, to close things out,
Yeah.
do you have any sort of long-term goals about like, because you've been in the industry for like still like a pretty long time, but like, what's
Yeah.
like your big thing? What's like your dream project? What do you want to like the thing you want to do the most while you're still in the industry?
I think like I want to figure out how to bridge this thing, right? Which is like bridging American or Western content or whatever you might want to call it, and kind of see how like it could work with Japan. And also like I also want to make Japan more respected in terms of anime. Like right now we see it, it's like, I think this year is the year when people started like taking it kind of seriously, right? Like in terms of anime's mainstream now,
Yeah,
right? But when I got in, it was still considered subculture,
yeah,
right? And I still want it to be kind of like I still want to give it that spotlight where it's like you take it just as like respected, you're respecting anime just as much as like say a Pixar film, right? Or the fandom to it is just as respected in the industry worldwide, rather than having that kind of, that saying, it's like, oh well, that's just anime. You know what I mean? Like you get that all the time.
yeah,
And for me, it's like I love anime. Like I was raised on it. And like if there's a way that I can kind of like bring it up, like in terms of like respectability and like popularity and whatever it is, like that's kind of my general goal. I'm still trying to make shows. I'm still trying to like, produce my own shows and produce my own movies or whatever it might be. But those are kind of like more minuscule compared to the overall, which is try to bridge, like try to push anime into the forefront, in terms of like industry respect.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like you said, like yeah, like anime's like still like definitely more mainstream now compared to like how it was like a decade ago.
Yeah.
But like the way people talk about it though, it's still just that sort of they even if they don't mean it, it's sort of that self-ironic, like deprecating ways and like
Yeah.
I'm like anime trash or whatever. We're just like if you love anime, just own it.
Just
Honestly,
just own it,
just
right?
own
Like
it. Yeah,
like I don't understand why like Jujutsu Kaisen, like the animation is like secondary to, a Mickey Mouse short. You know what I mean? Like those, I mean, those are two vastly different categories. But like, but you can when you like go to a Sifa, right? And like you go to the Annies and stuff like that, and like you see like, oh, what is the best short form content, right? That's been nominated, and it always ends up being like a Mickey Mouse short,
yeah,
right? Where it's like if I submitted like, how come when I submit, like, if you submitted a Jujutsu Kaisen design versus like a design from another show, like how come that doesn't get the respect or like the nomination that it deserves, right? Or like in terms of like best anime, like if we go in and we go into the categories of like best animated TV series, right? Like you always see something that sometimes you get kind of questionable. It's like, okay, is this politics or is it because they put a lot of money into it? Whereas like I always thought that Japanese anime was the best. Like it's considered to be the best in the world, right? But how come it's not getting that kind of respect that it deserves?
Yeah, because like there were like moments. I'm trying to remember. Like I know like one big moment everyone was like really confused on is like the one of the Madoka movies was
Yeah,
like nominated like in the Oscars. It was nominated for some big award
yeah,
thing, and like we all lost our minds over that, even though we knew for sure it wasn't gonna win. And
yeah.
like we know that phrase, I think it was like around 20, like around when Frozen came out, when someone like one of the judges said like, "Oh, I just picked that because like my daughter really liked it or something."
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it's just like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah. I
yeah.
mean, like that, like that category isn't really well respected or acknowledged to begin with. I haven't really like I don't really keep track of awards that much. So I don't really know if like that's changed or if it's still mostly the same. Because like, yeah, I mean, like that was a decade ago, and like we're in 2023 now, and like you said, like way back in 2020, we had that little like nature boom when COVID happened. So I'm just kind of wondering like. Have things changed, or have they still mostly remained the same? Like when it comes to like
I think
war, like
it's
that.
changing
Film,
now. Like Cyberpunk definitely got a lot of awards.
it did.
It is in competition, you know, like it competes in award shows. So that's a great thing about that. Um, it's just like we got to see more of that. And I think it's just the beginning, right? Where it's like, you know, Arcane swept like the best animation, right? Which is awesome, right? And like, you know, hopefully Cyberpunk is doing that as well. But just we just got to see more of that, you know, and I think it's also generational because like when it comes to entertainment, it's always about like who's the old guard, right? And what are their opinions and what do they like? And so as like that the age starts to age up and like people like you and I are starting to be the ones at the top, like that's where I think like anime will start getting its, you know, spot in the light.
It's already kind of starting to happen because like you said
Yeah,
like every single show these days has to have like oh there's gonna be like some reference to, like Sailor Moon or like Evangelion or
yeah,
like yeah so like it's already starting to happen so I'm a little it's gonna be funny like 20 years later like they're gonna be start referencing stuff that I had no idea about
yeah,
like
yeah.
and I'm really gonna
I mean,
feel
I'm already like, it's like, what are you referencing? It's like, oh, this show from like 2015. I was like, man, I'm starting to drop off. Like, I
I'm
think
not
I,
I'm not
because,
looking forward when that happens to me.
well, also at the same time, it's like a lot of times they reference anime within anime, you know, and like I believe that like creativity has to come from everywhere.
Yeah.
So like, so when it comes to like my references, I reference stuff from real life, movies, indie films, books, you know, like you have to be all around like that. I think that's where like Miyazaki's quote about like get the fuck out of the, like it's like how do you create things, like get the fuck out of the house, you know, and travel. Like I really took that to heart. And like I know for a fact that I've used that a lot in my meetings of like personal experiences, books that I've read, and that really helps.
Yeah, I always hear that like piece of advice a lot. Just like not even just like shows, like you said, personal experiences is like what happened to you. How do you want to convey that in this
Yeah,
like show, movie, or whatever? Like I feel like yeah, that's like the part more people should focus on. I feel because like whenever I hear someone say like, oh, you should take like when someone tells you like, oh, you should take from like everything, and like usually people just limit that to just like media, but not just media, just like everything about
everything.
just
Yeah,
you,
yeah,
your life what you dislike, what you don't like, and like anything that could be cool, just could be cool to like expand upon it, to like make
yeah.
fun of. It's like, yeah, like
I've been in
you.
meetings where I've talked about my experiences traveling Switzerland and then also talking about Bluey at the same time. You know,
Oh, I
like
can't escape that show.
yeah. I mean, I love that show a lot. But yeah, you'd be surprised like what you absorb as a sponge and how you're able to use that in creative meetings.
It's always like the weirdest stuff that like imprints on you too. You don't know why. But anyways, well, again, to round things out, do you have any
Yeah.
advice you'd like to give to like any like young like animators or just like artists in general, just who happen to stumble upon this? Like
Why would you want to go into animation? No, 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 no.
aside come on, we gotta give them some kind of hope here.
Yeah. No, I think really the question is why do you want to go into animation?
Okay.
Right? Like it's it's an entertainment industry, but you know, like it definitely requires a very particular type of person to go into animation because it's not, you know, things don't go like it's slow, right? It doesn't turn around fast. You have to stick with it because of how slow the process is. You kind of have to stick with it, and it's something that you can't like learn in one day, right? It's a gradual progression. Like even with my friends that are like directors or character designers or amazing animators, it's like they aren't who they are a month ago, a day ago, a year ago, right? It's a constant kind of like it's a constant learn, right? There's a learning curve no matter what you do. And so you have to be dedicated to it. And I think a lot of people go like, "Oh, I love animation." But you have to really dedicate yourself to it. And so like I would say like if you're ready for that, then fuck yeah, go do it, you know? And like you'll realize that the people that work in animation are the best. Like they're there to help you because it's more of a team effort. It's not a me kind of scenario, right? Like if you were going to do that, then great, go off and become an indie animator and make your own shorts, right? Like if you can do that yourself, then that's awesome. But when it comes to these big productions, when it comes to like television productions, movie productions, or whatever, my anime productions, it's a team effort. And so like you have to be able to get along with people. You don't want to burn those bridges. And yeah, just kind of like keep going at it and don't ever give up. Like literally, I'm telling you right now, like don't give up.
Mm.
Cause because with my years of experience, I've seen people come into animation, like come into the animation industry at different ages, like anywhere from like I had a friend who came in at 38, you know, and they transitioned from working in like public utilities, right? And I've seen people come in at 40 or like reinvent themselves at 60, right? So it's a lifetime thing. It's kind of like it's not a job, it's a lifestyle. That's it.
Oh,
That's my
oh.
rant.
Well, like you said, like I have like seen like a bunch of like people say the same thing about like, oh, it's never too late to break in because like you said, like people from all ages, like 40,
Yeah.
50, 60. And like, yeah, that gives me hope too. Cause like my relationship with like drawing, I've been very like on and off my
Yeah.
entire life. Cause like you know what they say, you're your own worst critic. And like the second I
Yeah.
put my second like my pencil hits paper, I'm just like, okay, I'm done. Because I just
Well,
get
I
so
think I think that
discouraged.
that's the thing too, right? Like
Mhm.
I've noticed that too in terms of because I work in development, which was you kind of decipher that thing. It's like, do you really want to make a show or do you just want to get the idea out? Right? Like there's a difference between like committing to a development of a show that will take you 5 to 7 years to even be on like the chances of it actually being like out there as a show is also it's against you, right? The percentages are against you. So sometimes I do ask like potential clients, is like, is this something you really want to go with like for 5 to 7 years? Do you want to run this marathon? Or do you want to just like kind of like, oh, I made it. I'm good. I can walk away from this now, right? And I can move on to my next idea or my next venture. If that's the case, then like make a short or make a comic or write a novel or like go on WordPad or like write fanfic or whatever that might be. But as long as you're getting it out, that's your kind of like that's your therapy, your artistic therapy, your creative therapy.
I mean, well, if I can't afford one, I guess art should be my therapist. Okay, thank you again for talking with me, and I'm so glad I got a chance to interview you. And if there's anything you want to plug, feel free to do it now.
No, nothing really other than like, if you're watching this, like welcome to animation or like, hopefully you'll get in and we'll get to work together.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.